So we came up with Sulforaxym, and this was about 2 years in the making. Just because we kept going back, and I probably drove Jason and Troy nuts because I kept saying nope, nope, nope. And so what we wound up with was an organic broccoli sprout, or a broccoli sprout extract. It's cold processed. It's got stabilized myrosinase enzyme. It's got a standardized glucoraphanin. It provides 1 milligram of sulforaphane to 2 milligrams of glucoraphanin. And then we threw in some astrazyme as well. The big challenge for me was a lot of the literature that you saw from Jed Fahey at NIH, who did a lot of the stuff, was talking about 40 to 60 milligrams of sulforaphane is a lot of the stuff they did. And so we tried every way possible to try and get that in a capsule, and you cannot get that much sulforaphane or sulforaphane potential in the capsule. It's just not enough. So I went back and started looking at a lot of the research, and I found some other levels that the doses were a little lower and still having positive effects. And so we wound up having a product that's pretty, as far as the sulforaphane dose, it's pretty consistent with the best, the things out there that have the most sulforaphane potential in them, just a cleaner and what we feel is a better product when we made it, okay? The other issue is I was really thinking about what Jed Fahey and those guys were doing, and it's really different than what we're doing. They were trying to push one pathway and see if they could make changes in whole bunches of things. And the reality is, in our world, and what I try and promote is not to just jam one pathway. We want to kind of be synergistic. We've got to kind of push it, but not force it. And so we don't need to maybe mega dose this. If we're working on diet, nutrition, and we're addressing organisms, and we're trying to do and remove all those stressors, then maybe we don't have to push this pathway so hard. We just need to coax it along. And so we're seeing some nice changes in our patients that are actually starting to utilize the product, which is great. The dose, we took this dose, it's 2 capsules, has 1,336 milligrams of broccoli sprouts. It comes out to about 13.36 milligrams of glucoraphanin. You'll see that as sulforaphane glucosinolates on another label. And the sulforaphane potential is not less than, both of these are not less than 6.68 milligrams. So what does that mean? So we may get a dose that's got a higher concentration of glucoraphanin. We may get it may be a higher sulforaphane potential, but the minimal dose that we're going to get from 2 capsules is the 6.86 milligrams of sulforaphane. And it's got stabilized myrosinase activity. We got the enzyme stabilized to put in there with it. So I look at it like this: general health purposes, I'm not huge on pushing a bunch of stuff. So for general health purposes, 2 per day I think is probably a good way to kind of support the system. Therapeutic effect, it could be 4+. And depending on how you look at your patients or muscle test them, or you look at labs or enzymes, I think you've got to challenge each person individually. That's what I do with every dose. I don't have a set dose for anything in my practice. I dose people, kind of see how they do, pulse things, dose things. I never take the back of a jar as what to take. Hopefully none of you guys do either, right? Because you may have a person who is about 110 pounds and they may need like a lot more to get things moving maybe. And you may have somebody, you give them a little bit and they're very sensitive to it. So I always tighter things up. But if you do muscle testing, I know some of you guys probably do muscle testing. Muscle test, see what works and what's functional for you. So let's talk about some of the benefits of sulforaphane. Sulforaphane remains one of the most potent natural occurring inducers of the cytoprotective phase 2 enzymes, and this is all via pushing that NRF2 pathway. Sulforaphane arthritis. Anybody deal with anybody with arthritis? Yeah. So sulforaphane inhibits the expression of key metalloproteinases implicated in osteoarthritis independently of NRF2 and blocks the inflammation of NF-kappa B to protect against cartilage destruction in vivo and in vitro. How about that? So if you have an arthritic patient, what are they usually doing? They're taking what? NSAIDs and antioxidants, a whole bunch of things. Sulforaphane, whether it's broccoli sprouts or sulforazyme, can actually help that manage that arthritic condition, improve it. Okay. Sulforaphane protects cartilage. Another paper. In this paper, they said that we were able to show that sulforaphane treatment acts contrary on naive and inflammatory synthesites. Sulforaphane induces cytoprotective transcription factor NRF2. So they're talking about how sulforaphane actually helps the synoviocytes via upregulation of NRF2. Essentially what it's really doing is helping reduce the inflammatory mechanism. And this is a case of cartilage destruction in RA. If you have a person, by the way, side note, if you have a person who's got chronic arthritis, one of the number one things you want to do is you want to check, see if they have chronic infections. Yeast and bacteria feast on the joint cartilage, right? It's called bacterial and candidal arthritis. If you haven't heard that, you want to look that one up, okay? So if you got a patient who's got chronic gut issues, right? And they got, this joint hurts, that joint, almost every joint hurts. Check their gut, check their oral cavity. If they got chronic infections, they probably have systemic infections. So if you're my way, I always think is if I'm trying to knock down organisms in the gut, I'm always thinking about systemically as well, because they're outside there, right? They get everywhere. Sulforaphane in the nervous system. So they talk about in this paper, these papers, there's about, they're all at the end. Improves cognitive performance. I can't read this. Attenuates cognitive deficits. Alleviates brain swelling, prevents memory impairment, recovered memory, drives NRF2 up, helps support NRF2. Sulforaphane in cancer, there's a bunch, I got a bunch of resources in here on how NRF2 helps support cancer, but you also have to be careful because for some cases, excessive NRF2 can support cancer cells, especially when in a kind of protect them, especially for things like chemo. Sulforaphane prevents and combats cancer. Another paper. It induces apoptosis in cancer cells and protects non-cancer cell mitochondria. Sulforaphane protects MSCs from toxins, the mesenchymal stem cells. Those are the reproductive cells. They're talking about how sulforaphane may be a potential treatment for cancer. Sulforaphane was found to be active against several forms of cancer. Its effects range from protection of cells from DNA damage to modulation of cell cycle via pro-apoptotic, anti-angiogenesis, and anti-metastasis. Sulforaphane modulates cellular homeostasis via activation of NRF2. Can sulforaphane help cholesterol? Can help lower cholesterol. How about that, right? So in 12 healthy subjects, they had 100 grams a day for 1 week, decreased total LDL cholesterol and increased HDL. Why would that happen? If you increase NRF2, you decrease what? Cellular inflammation, right? If I decrease cellular inflammation, I switch from deactivating thyroid hormone to activating thyroid hormone. One of the leading causes of high cholesterol, if you have a patient who's got high cholesterol, they've got cellular hypothyroidism going on, okay? You bring glucose into that cell, you're not running Krebs cycle efficiently if you don't have thyroid hormone. That acetyl-CoA comes in, that stuff's going to go right back out and make cholesterol. So one of the leading causes, and there's been papers written about, I got about 4 of them in my Quicka, talk about how everybody who has high cholesterol should be checked for cellular hypothyroidism before they're put on statin. But guess what? Well, they don't say cellular hypothyroidism, they say hypothyroidism, right? But hypothyroidism starts where? In the cell, in most cases. Sulforaphane and diabetes, there's lots of literature on how sulforaphane helps manage diabetes. Now again, it's the same, if you think about this, there's a couple mechanisms here, but the big one is if I reduce inflammation, I increase thyroid hormone activation, right? And then I can get glucose into the cell and become less insulin resistant. Talk about, this is another paper on glucose production. Sulforaphane has been suggested as a new potential anti-diabetic compound. Pretty cool, right? It may combat obesity. Sulforaphane improves diabetes. Sulforaphane and detoxification. Sulforaphane as the aromatase inhibitor. So the paper's in there. But bronchospasms activate detoxification and glutathione production, increasing GST while decreasing ALT and AST. This was in rats. But A lot of these studies were originally done in rats. Jet Fahey and those guys are kind of leading the charge for a lot of the human studies, but there's a lot more coming out. Sulforaphane in the immune system. In this paper, they talk about how sulforaphane protects from T-cell mediated autoimmunity. How's that? Right? Pretty good. Sulforaphane improves TH1, TH17, TH1 induced autoimmune disease by inducing hemoxygenase 1 and inhibiting NF-kappa B, P65 regulated IL-23, IL-12 expression. It's this NF-kappa B and this P65 piece that really can shut down NRF2 function inside your nuclei and not allow them to upregulate those detoxification enzymes and antioxidant systems. Sulforaphane can boost the immune system, sulforaphane enhances bacterial clearance by macrophages and increases the activity of natural killer cells. Sulforaphane-based TH1 immunity. These isothiocyanates, sulforaphane actually helps reduce biofilms. Sulforaphane attenuates H. pylori, so this bugger will knock out H. pylori. How important is that? Think about this. We'll go back to cell danger response. If you have cell danger response, you're deactivating thyroid hormone. What do you need to make stomach acid? You need thyroid hormone, right? So if you don't make enough stomach acid, so if you're in chronic stress, fight or flight, do you need stomach acid? No. Thyroid hormone's downregulated. You can't make that as much stomach acid. Sulforaphane can help attenuate the H. pylori. You reduce the inflammation, or you knock down the inflammatory mechanism. You can turn your acid pumps back on. Your thyroid hormone can upregulate. Now you can make more acid. Now you can get rid of your good friend H. pylori. More papers on H. pylori. It's an antiviral. Again, you're doing the same thing. You're helping that natural healing and support process. Sulforaphane combats bacteria and fungal infections. This human B defensin 2 is important, really important in the GI tract. One of the things that drives that is definitely bile physiology, plays a massive role in that. And if you haven't heard Kelly or I talk about bile and the importance of bile flow, if you have chronic gut infections, chronic SIBO, chronic leaky gut, your patient more than likely has a bile issue. Okay? Guaranteed. You have to have healthy bile absorption to have healthy cell junctions. You don't have healthy bile acid physiology, you're going to have leaky gut. You're going to have reduced HBD2 as well. Sulforaphane, oxidative stress and inflammation. Sulforaphane is an indirect antioxidant. What's the difference? Doesn't have that antioxidant effect directly. It stimulates NRF2, which turns all those processes on.
Intelligent antioxidant.
It's an intelligent, very good. Did you TM that?
Should.
So role of sulforaphane in protection of GI tract against H. pylori and NSAIDs induced oxidative stress. All your patients who've been taking NSAIDs for 20, 30 years are going to have chronic infections in their gut, right? And they're also not going to be able to heal their cartilage because that's going to inhibit their stem cells. You inhibit their stem cells, they're not going to heal and repair appropriately. Stem cells are systems still working, it's just not working well. They're not replacing the same tissues. Sulforaphane combats inflammation. Sulforaphane inactivates NF-kappa B, key inducer of inflammation. Sulforaphane activates NRF2. We talked about that. There's references in the back. Sulforaphane combats autoimmune inflammation. Sulforaphane can attenuate pain. Sulforaphane blocks COX-2 and IONS in injured nerve cells. I got a patient with chronic pain. What should I do with them? Broccoli sprouts or sulforaphane, right? Or sulforazyme. Great. Sulforaphane prevents and combats heart and cardiovascular disease. Why would it do that? Cardiovascular disease is not caused by high cholesterol, right? It's caused by chronic inflammation in the system. Sulforaphane protects against GI injury. Sulforaphane, lab to bench. So this is talking about the crucifer-derived bioactive phytochemical. Sulforaphane is a significant inducer of NRF2. The transcription factor activates cells' endogenous defenses via a battery of cytoprotective genes. For a broccoli sprout supplement to demonstrate bioactivity in vivo, it must retain both the sulforaphane-yielding precursor glucoraphanin, and it must have the myrosinase enzyme. You can't rely on your patient's gut flora to do it on its own, okay? And then there's a lot of references. If you don't, I read too much, okay? So I will give you guys another clue. Does anybody like to do research? Nobody? If you do you have Quicka? Quicka, Q-I-Q-Q-A. You can get a free version of it, or Q-I-Q-Q-A. So what happens to me, what I was trying to do is find a place to put all my PDFs, right? So I could highlight them and kind of organize them. What Quicka will allow you to do is put them into this software. You can read them right in there, and then you can tab them. So you know, hey, this is an NRF2 thing, this is a cancer thing, this is a antioxidant thing, this is a sulforaphane thing. You put as many tabs or things on there, so next time you want to know, where's that paper I had on sulforaphane, you type in this search, and every paper that's got those keywords in it will show up. So now you have all those papers in one place. If you get, there's a free version, so you can just share it with yourself. If you get the paid version, then you can share it with somebody else. Okay? Really good thing.